On July 28, 1943, over the skies of Germany, a B-17 Flying Fortress nicknamed All-American faced what would become one of the most extraordinary survival stories in the history of aerial warfare. This heavy bomber, a mainstay of the United States Army Air Force's daylight bombing campaign, was part of a formation attacking the German industrial city of Bremen. What makes this mission extraordinary is not the target, nor the mission plan, but the sheer scale of destruction the plane endured and the fact that it still returned home. All-American took off from England as part of the 8th Air Force's massive strike force, carrying 10 men, each trained for the harsh realities of high-altitude bombing over hostile territory. Within minutes of crossing the coast, they encountered the well-coordinated defenses of the Luftwaffe and German flak batteries. Anti-aircraft artillery opened fire with terrifying precision, tearing through formations of American bombers. But the worst was yet to come. Fighter aircraft from Jagdgeschwader 1 and 26, two of Germany's elite fighter wings, converged on the bombers with deadly intent. By the time the mission was halfway complete, All-American had been struck more than 300 times. Bullet holes riddled the fuselage, gaping holes appeared in the wings, the nose turret was destroyed, and the tail gunner's position was critically damaged. Engines sputtered from direct hits, hydraulic lines were severed, and the crew was injured in multiple locations. The radio operator was bleeding from shrapnel wounds, and the navigator struggled to maintain course as instruments failed one by one. Yet despite these catastrophic damages, the aircraft did not go down. In fact, it pressed on to the target, released its bombs over Bremen, and began the perilous journey back to England. Historians have called this mission an aerial miracle, and accounts from the TOA surviving crew highlight a mix of determination, skill, and what they later described as sheer luck. The B-17 Flying Fortress itself was designed for durability. Boeing's engineers emphasized a strong airframe capable of withstanding multiple hits, a design philosophy that would be tested to its extreme on this day. Each component, from the self-sealing fuel tanks to the redundant control systems, played a role in keeping the bomber aloft. But even so, returning from a mission with more than 300 rounds tearing through the plane was almost unheard of. Most bombers that sustained even a fraction of this damage were lost to mechanical failure or enemy fire. For the crew, survival was a day-to-day calculation. Lieutenant Robert Morgan, the pilot, maintained strict control despite the chaos, relying on a combination of intuition and training. Co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and gunners coordinated to patch temporary fixes mid-flight, sometimes physically holding damaged controls together. Every decision, every maneuver had life or death consequences. This mission also highlighted the brutal realities of the Allied strategic bombing campaign. The 8th Air Force lost hundreds of aircraft over Europe in 1943 alone. Casualties were staggering, and the odds for bomber crews were grim. Returning from a single raid intact was considered a major success. Returning with a battered aircraft after sustaining hundreds of hits was virtually unheard of. Yet All-American did precisely that, demonstrating both the resilience of the plane and the extraordinary bravery of its crew. In the annals of World War II aviation, stories like this were rare but pivotal. They became symbols of courage, engineering excellence, and the unpredictable calculus of survival in the air war over Europe. And for those who witnessed the return of All-American, it was impossible not to regard the plane and its crew as a living testament to the phrase, "never give up." This story, like many from the skies over Europe, blends fact with almost unbelievable circumstance. Over the next sections, we will trace the entire mission from takeoff to landing, detail the specific damages inflicted on the aircraft, explore the decisions that kept it aloft, and meet the men whose skill and determination brought everyone home against impossible odds. As All-American climbed into the gray, frigid skies over northern Germany, The crew knew they were entering the deadliest stretch of their mission. At altitudes exceeding 25,000 feet, temperatures plunged to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and oxygen was a precious commodity. Every bomber in the formation was a moving target, silhouetted against the pale European sky. German flak batteries, camouflaged in the fields and towns below, awaited with deadly anticipation. Shortly after crossing the coast, the formation began to feel the first sting of anti-aircraft fire. Bursts of black smoke and explosions rattled the wings and fuselage. For the uninitiated, flak was terrifyingly efficient. German 88mm guns, guided by radar and optical sights, were capable of tearing through a B-17 in seconds. Shrapnel shredded control surfaces, punctured fuel tanks, and injured gunners. Crew members later described the noise as an unrelenting, metallic roar and orchestra of death surrounding them on all sides. But the real danger came from the Luftwaffe fighters. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s swarmed the formation with practiced precision. Using head-on attacks, which exploited the bomber's weakest defensive points, they tore into the wings and tail. One of the first hits to All-American came directly to the nose turret, incapacitating Sergeant Richard Dickmore, the gunner stationed there. Shrapnel tore through his helmet and shoulder, forcing him to crawl to the rear for safety. The tail gunner, Staff Sergeant John Quinlan, reported multiple bullet holes in his turret, and hydraulic lines that controlled the stabilizer were partially severed. Damage reports from the crew revealed the full extent of the assault. The right wing suffered multiple rounds of structural damage, including holes large enough to see the sky through. Engine number 3, already weakened from flak, began to smoke ominously. One of the oxygen lines was severed, forcing crew members to share the remaining supply. The navigator, Second Lieutenant Richard W. Huff, described the cockpit as an icebox with bullets for decoration. Yet amid the chaos, discipline and training held. Pilot Robert Morgan maintained control of the crippled aircraft, using a technique known as differential throttle to compensate for the failing engines. Co-pilot, First Lieutenant Jim Varinas, monitored fuel lines and instrument failures, alerting Morgan to potential catastrophic malfunctions. Each gunner, despite wounds and exhaustion, continued to fire at approaching fighters, buying precious minutes for the plane to stay aloft. Historians emphasize the rarity of such missions. During the summer of 1943, the 8th Air Force suffered a 20 to 30% loss rate on deep penetration raids into Germany. The Luftwaffe was well coordinated, highly experienced, and equipped with aircraft specifically designed to intercept and destroy Allied bombers. For a single B-17 to withstand hundreds of hits and continue flying was extraordinary. The design of the Flying Fortress contributed significantly to this survival. Reinforced spars in the wings, redundant control cables, and multiple engines that could operate independently allowed damaged aircraft to limp home. By the time the formation approached Bremen, All-American had taken over 300 individual hits. The crew had lost the use of one engine entirely and could only partially control another. Bullet holes riddled the fuselage like a sieve. The bombardier's windows were shattered, leaving him exposed to the freezing wind and fragments of glass. Yet remarkably, the crew pressed on, maintaining formation as best they could. Bombing runs depended on precision. Even slight deviations could make the difference between hitting the target and failing the mission. The decision to continue, despite catastrophic damage, was as much psychological as tactical. Crew members understood that abandoning the formation or attempting to turn back early would invite concentrated attacks from fighters and flak. Discipline, courage, and trust in both the aircraft and their fellow crew members were the only things keeping them alive. It was a delicate balance of human skill and mechanical resilience, a combination rarely tested to such extremes. By the time bombs were released over Bremen, All-American was little more than a flying wreck. Yet it remained in the air, a testament to both Boeing's engineering and the indomitable spirit of its crew. Observers on the ground later reported seeing the battered bomber struggling against the wind and smoke, a lone figure among the formation, moving with a determination that bordered on defiance. The journey back to England was far from over. While the target had been successfully struck, German fighters continued to shadow the formation, and flak batteries remained a constant threat. Every mile closer to home would test the limits of the crew's endurance, the aircraft's integrity, and the human will to survive. After releasing their bombs over Bremen, the crew of All-American faced a daunting reality. The journey home would be more perilous than the bombing run itself. The aircraft was severely compromised, its engines struggling, control surfaces partially inoperative, and structural integrity badly damaged. Each second in the air presented a new risk, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. Lieutenant Robert Morgan, the pilot, knew that any miscalculation could send the B-17 into an unrecoverable spin. Engine 3 had failed entirely, and Engine 4 was operating at reduced power. The right wing bore extensive structural damage, causing asymmetrical lift that required constant adjustments to the throttle and rudder. Co-pilot Jim Varinis assisted tirelessly, manually compensating for hydraulic failures while keeping track of the aircraft's altitude and heading. The navigator, Lieutenant Huff, recalculated their route to avoid known flak concentrations, relying on dead reckoning and sporadic radio updates that occasionally worked despite the damaged systems. The crew worked as a single organism. Gunners continued to scan for lingering German fighters, although few dared approach a plane so visibly damaged. Bombardier John H.A. Craven, now exposed to the icy high-altitude wind through the shattered nose, assisted in stabilizing the instruments and signaling altitude changes. The radio operator patched what communications were still possible, coordinating with other bombers in the formation to maintain a semblance of protective cover. The physical toll on the men was immense. Blood loss, frostbite, and exhaustion compounded the stress of flying a crippled aircraft. Yet despite the injuries, there was no panic. Discipline and rigorous training were their only defense against the chaos surrounding them. Lieutenant Morgan later described the cockpit as a frozen, bloody tomb, yet the crew's cohesion never wavered. Each man performed his duty with precision born of necessity. As the formation crossed into occupied Dutch airspace, additional flak bursts shook the plane. A direct hit to the tail stabilizer caused the aircraft to veer dangerously, requiring a series of complex maneuvers to regain control. Every motion of the yoke and rudder had to be calculated, compensating for structural weaknesses and failing hydraulics. In one particularly critical moment, Morgan and Varinis worked together to maintain altitude while manually cranking the trim, a procedure normally assisted by powered controls. Failure would have meant immediate loss of control. Despite these challenges, All-American maintained enough altitude to reach the North Sea and the English coast. However, visibility was poor and the crew had no functional landing instruments. The navigator guided them as best he could, relying on coastal landmarks and intermittent radio beacons. The final approach to the airfield in England was tense, the B-17 limping on 3 engines and barely controllable in the wind. Crew members braced for impact, aware that any misjudgment could turn survival into tragedy. Remarkably, the plane landed successfully, its landing gear intact despite the punishment sustained. Witnesses described the aircraft as a flying sieve, riddled with bullet holes from nose to tail. The fuselage bore the scars of over 300 enemy rounds. Windows were shattered, the rudder hung at an unnatural angle, and control surfaces responded sluggishly. Yet the aircraft came to a halt on the runway, carrying all 10 men safely. The landing was not just a mechanical success, it was a psychological triumph. The crew, bruised and bloodied, had defied impossible odds. Their survival highlighted both the ingenuity of Boeing's engineers and the extraordinary courage of the airmen. All-American had endured the unthinkable. Hundreds of rounds, multiple system failures, and near-total structural compromise, yet it had returned to England intact. Historically, this mission is often cited as a case study in both aircraft durability and human endurance under extreme conditions. The B-17's rugged design, including self-sealing fuel tanks, redundant control systems, and reinforced structure, was pivotal. Equally important was the crew's training, discipline, and calm under pressure. Lieutenant Morgan later reflected that the plane flew on sheer willpower, a statement echoed in historical accounts as part testament to the Morgan, as part testament to the plane flew on sheer willpower. A statement echoed in historical accounts as part testament to the obedience and meant to the men and part tribute to the engineering marvel that kept them alive. The aftermath of the mission also had a lasting impact on Allied strategy. Reports of the plane's endurance circulated among bomber crews, bolstering morale and demonstrating that even in the most desperate situations, skill, preparation, and teamwork could prevail. All-American would go on to serve as a symbol of resilience, illustrating the limits of both man and machine and the extraordinary feats that could be achieved when those limits were tested. When All-American finally touched down on English soil, the mission was over, but its place in history was just beginning. Newspapers did not immediately carry the story. The military initially classified details of bomber survivability. Yet, within the ranks of the 8th Air Force and among Allied engineers, the tale of this battered B-17 spread quickly, growing into a symbol of resilience against overwhelming odds. The aircraft itself was a marvel of engineering. Boeing's B-17 design emphasized redundancy and survivability at a time when bomber losses were alarmingly high. Self-sealing fuel tanks prevented fires from being instantly fatal, multiple engines allowed crippled planes to continue flying, and the rugged airframe could absorb damage that would destroy lesser aircraft. Yet no manual could have prepared a crew for the extraordinary stress of more than 300 rounds tearing through the fuselage, wings, and tail. It was the combination of human skill and machine resilience that saved the day. For the crew, survival was more than a matter of training. It was an extraordinary exercise in teamwork and courage. Each man relied on the others to compensate for injuries, equipment failures, and the constant barrage of enemy fire. Lieutenant Robert Morgan, the pilot, remained calm and precise despite severe fatigue, while gunners, navigators, and engineers improvised repairs mid-flight, sometimes using nothing more than sheer force and ingenuity. Their coordination was a living testament to military discipline in action. Historians have long debated what allowed All-American to survive when so many other bombers were lost. Some point to the aircraft's structural integrity and Boeing's engineering foresight. Others emphasize the crew's determination and training. The truth likely lies in both, a durable aircraft combined with an extraordinary human will. The story also serves as a window into the broader experience of bomber crews in World War II. While daylight raids were highly effective strategically, they were brutal, and the mortality rate was among the highest in the U.S. Armed Forces. Surviving such a mission, let alone returning with the plane largely intact, was exceptional. All-American would later be repaired and returned to service, continuing its role in the air war over Europe. Its story, preserved in mission reports, crew interviews, and historical records, has inspired generations of historians, engineers, and aviators. The aircraft became more than a machine. It became a symbol of perseverance, illustrating how human courage and technological innovation could combine to defy seemingly insurmountable odds. There is also a deeper moral embedded in the story. In the chaos of war, where destruction and loss were routine, moments of extraordinary resilience provided hope and inspiration. The survival of All-American was not just a triumph of machinery or skill, it was a reminder of the capacity for determination, ingenuity, and teamwork under extreme conditions. It demonstrated that even when the situation appears hopeless, preparation, courage, and cooperation can produce outcomes that defy expectation. According to legend, some crew members referred to the aircraft affectionately as the Flying Miracle, a nickname that encapsulated the extraordinary circumstances of the mission. While historians caution against embellishing wartime accounts, the documented facts alone are remarkable. A heavily damaged bomber, 10 men fighting for every second of flight, and a successful return after sustaining over 300 enemy hits. The story remains one of the most remarkable examples of aerial endurance in World War II. Decades later, All-American continues to appear in historical texts, documentaries, and studies of World War II aviation. Its story resonates not just because of the incredible numbers, 300 hits, but because it illustrates something timeless. The combination of human courage, mechanical resilience, and disciplined training can achieve the extraordinary. In an era defined by destruction, All-American returned as a symbol of survival, determination, and hope. Ultimately, the plane and its crew remind us that history is shaped not only by strategy and numbers, but by the remarkable acts of individuals facing impossible odds. All-American survived, and so did its crew, not by chance alone, but by skill, courage, and the extraordinary engineering of a flying fortress designed to endure the very worst that war could deliver. This is a story that endures because it proves a simple, powerful truth. Even when shattered, when tested beyond all limits, resilience can carry us home.